All right, welcome back to another edition of the Dirty Verdict Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Peter Taaffe.
I'm your other host, Kyle Herbert. Welcome to Election Central.
We've got one other host.
And I'm your third host, Bill Ogden, full-time litigator, unlike Kyle.
Oh, it stings.
And Bill, we've got a special guest today, a repeat guest, Anthony Osso. Anthony,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Before we start, a little housekeeping.
Yes.
I'm back from New York last weekend where I watched my second son run the New York Marathon.
Wow.
Does he just who hurt him? Why would he want to run that far?
I don't know. He did it with some of his friends in honor of one of their other friends who passed away suddenly.
Oh, that's a great reason to do it.
So they were like one of the highest fundraising groups.
Really?
Good for him.
But it was
the New York City Marathon?
Uh-huh.
Nice. How is he feeling?
Not good.
Yeah.
He is basically, he's a good athlete, but he hadn't trained super hard.
Oh, and you decided to go run it.
But he was happy. He's a happy little warrior.
I mean, you can't even use them after.
You've done them?
I have not.
Okay. Bill, what's your best marathon time?
Yeah, I've done back-to-back halves in the same day. I've never done just a full. I did have a 7-minute break in between them.
Peter?
0.
Interesting.
I'll be honest. I don't think I could. They have that one person with the sign. It's the Oprah time that she did when she when she trained for it and all that. I don't think I could beat that right now.
The Houston Marathon goes within 2 blocks of my house.
Same.
And I like to sit out there in a lawn chair with a 6-pack and a cigar. People frown on that, but I really enjoy it.
My buddy Chris runs it almost every year, and every year I have the worst, heaviest Guinness I can find, and I hand it to him as he runs by. He takes one sip and throws it back at me.
Coward.
That's what I said, quitter.
Yeah.
All right, but it was New York fun.
I would highly recommend going to watch it. It is at 61st Street and 1st Avenue where they come off one of the bridges from Brooklyn into Manhattan. It's like Mardi Gras. It is rocking, for about 20 blocks up. And then all over the place. It's hard to find even a place to get on the rail. It's 3 deep.
My dad ran it one time. Yeah. Claims that he drank a much tequila the night before, but I was not there to confirm that. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel back in the day, that's just how it was.
Right.
Yeah, it's impressive. The whole thing is great, beautiful weather. The whole city comes out for it. So
that's awesome.
I'd recommend it. Find someone you're friends with.
That's pretty tough for Bill.
So are you saying that the New York City Marathon is better than the Boston Marathon? Boston strong, Peter. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know about the Boston Marathon.
Well, I'd rather run in New York or Boston than Houston this time of year, too.
Yeah. It was 55 and sunny and very nice. So anyhow, that was my weekend. Anyone else got any personal highlights?
I went to the Renaissance Fair. Holy cow.
Do we have video of that?
We can't play it here because we've seen those costumes.
So
I was in chainmail.
The last time I went to the Renaissance Fair, I think was 1992, 1991. Had a great time. It's gotten a lot weirder since then. Maybe it was super weird back then and I just didn't know it. But I took the whole family, and it was... If you've not watched the Renaissance Fair HBO deal, you should. They did a documentary on the Texas Renaissance Fair.
I go every year. I take Jack.
Do you dress up? I assume you dress up.
No.
It was Pirate Weekend, so we had swords and eye patches and hats. But, it was something. I'd go check it out.
Super fun. Worth the hour and 25-minute drive.
So we did it in so it's in Todd Mission, which is only 40 minutes away.
It was in Plantersville.
Used to be in Plantersville. A few years ago, they moved it to Todd Mission, which is about 40.
Isn't it the same place? I thought every time. I think they just rezoned the city lines.
Well, it's in Todd Mission now. It took us about 50 minutes to get there.
That's not bad.
Okay, speaking of weird events, we brought Anthony on to talk about the Menendez brother, I guess, retrial or reconsideration.
Yeah, so it's not really a retrial. You've kind of got 2 avenues at which the defense is trying to get a resentencing consideration. You've got the habeas proceeding, which is basically an appeal after an appeal, and then you've got a formal request for resentencing that's made in the district attorney's office. So it should be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks.
Okay, let's set the stage. So this was, I believe, in August of 1989. So you were not alive.
Not even alive.
Okay, Anthony not alive. Bill was
August of what?
89.
I was 2.
Okay, Kyle?
Exactly. 6th grade?
Okay, I had just graduated from high school, was just about to start, University of Texas, and there was a murder, and it was a husband and wife. Do you remember the parents' name? It was Kitty and
Jose. Yeah,
okay,
Jose.
so they were murdered in their Beverly Hills
mansion,
mansion,
for lack of a better term.
You can't ever use the word. It's Beverly Hills. It's always mansion after that.
Yeah,
I never like starter home.
It wasn't a cheap house, that's for sure.
So he had been, I think, an executive with RCA and actually Live. The predecessor, Live Nation.
Oh,
and they had 2 sons, Eric and Kyle. Lyle, not Kyle. Kyles are known to have problems, but
we're pacifists though generally.
Yeah. So Eric and Lyle, one is 21, one is 18.
Which would make them like exactly the same age as you.
18. The 18-year-old was, I think he was born in 70. I'm 71, but we would have been, yeah. One was at Princeton, but was home because he had some problems with the Princeton administration. And so bodies are found, and the initial story from the Lyle and Eric are what, Anthony? What's their position?
My understanding is that there were, I think, years of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse that led up to that murder. And I think that the argument originally from the defense was that they were under the belief that they were going to be abused again and that they reacted in self-defense. They weren't arguing self-defense. They were arguing, it was an argument of self-defense, but the argument was, while it may not have been the objective and reasonable belief, that they weren't acting with malice when they killed both their parents.
And their initial story to the police was that it was some unknown intruders that had...
The mafia.
Yeah, the mafia. No, I don't know exactly.
No, really.
What really the mafia?
Well, I think that their stories changed. They initially suggested, we weren't there. Somebody might have come in the back door to steal. And then some narrative begins to develop saying, my dad's a powerful businessman. He has some relationship to the mafia. The mafia killed them.
Yeah, I did read that because I think there was initially the investigation thought that, I guess their leads were related to like his business dealings through RCA. So that kind of adds up.
And so, and then I would know this because I was actually old enough to, form a thought.
I was a very well-informed 12-year-old.
Okay.
I wasn't even a thought. So
yeah, I was in the middle of frat life, and so I didn't care about anything other than that. But it was they came under the radar because they started spending a ton of money. This guy had the dad, was very wealthy executive.
Yeah,
and so they're spending a ton of money, and the police start thinking, that doesn't really look like people who just lost both their parents, like what they would act like, and that's how they got drilled down on.
Well, I think what they got drilled down on was an admission that was made either to a psychologist or the girlfriend of a psychologist that they had been talking to leading up to them becoming suspects in the investigation. But yeah, I don't think, I think when one of the brothers was arrested, he was on a plane back from Israel from a trip to play tennis, which really isn't indicative of like the relative of a crime victim.
But he was like he was pretty well-regarded, highly ranked tennis player.
Yes. I think that's the defense point that I would make.
So I have several sets of probably very dumb questions, but I don't want to jump in until Peter's done.
No, I think we just need to set the
for sure,
because there's a lot of blocking and tackling legal stuff that Anthony can help us out on. Okay, so just continue to set the stage, and there's like 10 documentaries, so it's not like we're plowing new ground. So they are tried first, in the first trial, as I understand it, the judge allowed a lot of the their position that they had been sexually abused by their father, and their mother knew about it and had not intervened. And there was I think it was a hung jury on the first one.
Hung jury. Bizarre. The first trial, they had two sets of juries viewing the trial, and then they deliberated independently for each defendant, which I've never seen before in Texas.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Doesn't that suggest of inconsistent verdicts if there's a conspiracy between two people to murder?
I mean, the question would be, what happens if one gets convicted, one doesn't?
Well, yeah, that's my.
But I don't think it'd be inconsistent because each of them has their own story as to the crime, as to the abuse that they saw it, and maybe it was different and impacted in different ways.
I think that the older brother said that the abuse stopped when he was like 8 years old, The younger brother said that the abuse continued all the way till he was 17 or 18 years old.
Which could be true.
Could be true.
They could both be true at the same time.
Sure.
And
I think I think sexual abuse can go on for a long time, but if I'm 16 years old and I'm still being sexually abused, I just think it's odd that you've seen pictures of them when they committed the murder.
They're pretty yoked.
Oh, I mean, one of them was like a collegiate athlete.
Right. I might, it's hard to say what I would do in that situation, but I might turn around and throw a haymaker. Just a thought, but.
Well, and we know that they had their own issues before this, like a bunch of burglaries and some bad acts.
They had a little bit of a criminal history.
So anyhow, retried a second time, convicted, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Yes.
Real quick, did both juries acquit or were hung? What's the difference between an acquittal and hung?
So a hung jury they didn't come to a unanimous decision. So in criminal court, you gotta
get everybody.
You gotta get everybody. It could be one person. So like in Vordaer or a close.
You just try and find that one guy.
Absolutely.
Or girl.
Yeah. A lot of times it could be a girl. But you need 12 people to find guilty. And so that if they're deadlocked, then that's a hung jury. Acquittal is unanimous, not guilty.
Got it. And if there's an acquittal, the state can then
retry the case.
Excuse me.
Hung jury, they can retry the case. Acquittal,
you're done. That's double jeopardy. Hung jury, state's free to keep going forward, try as many times as they want.
Yes.
I feel like you're just saying hung as much as you can, Kyle, at this point.
Well,
okay, so they get retried, and I believe it was in '96 they're convicted for murder, given life without parole. And end of story, they're in jail for life. See you guys. But something new has happened.
Sure. Well, I think too, one thing that's interesting is that, and this is, I think most defense attorneys will tell you, your best shot at an acquittal on a case like this is going to be your first shot. So once you have, at the retrial, they show their cards. So the state prepares.
I gotcha.
What legal arguments am I going to make to object to all the evidence of extraneous sexual abuse that's going to come into play? How am I going to twist the narrative so as to call these guys out or at least attack their credibility? So
in the civil context, we have to give everybody everything.
Yeah.
But as a defense lawyer, you can kind of catch the state flat-footed with a brand new argument.
We choose or we produce.
Right. But once you've made that argument and they're going to try it again, they're bloated for bear.
Yeah, you can get impeached at that point by contradictions.
Yeah. Oof. Well, and they know, if I put my client on the stand and it's the first time he's ever testified, he's never given a statement before, well, it's hard to
Can't impeach anybody because it's brand new.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So
okay, and we kind of jumped. Anthony's been on the show before. It's been about a year, but you're with Dan Cogdill and Associates.
Yeah.
And still there and still doing good things in the criminal defense world.
Everything's been great. And
so if you search through our prior episodes, you'll see Anthony's on there where we talk mostly about the Ken Paxton impeachment trial, which all were successful on. But obviously you have we've talked about other stories where you and Dan have been successful with some of your clients. So that's why we asked you. You've got extensive criminal defense experience.
Yeah, and I do think the case that Dan and I recently tried, I think is an interesting parallel to this case and the laws in California. You mentioned that he's facing up to life without parole, but originally the minimum for murder in California was 25 to life without parole. In Texas, it's 5 to life. And in this instance, you've got 2 bodies. So what Gabriel Garcon is trying to do is, the DA for Los Angeles County is basically submitting a recommendation of resentencing to the judge and is asking him to resentence them and basically assess their sentence to 50 years to life in prison. And because they were under the age of 26 at the time they committed the offense, they are eligible for parole immediately. So that doesn't mean that they would get paroled out. This is a multi-step process, and so I think that's what the public. There have been a lot of questions about that in the public.
So does the DA's office have to agree that resentencing is appropriate in order to bring this before the judge?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's crazy, and this doesn't even exist in Texas. In California, there's a penal code, there's a statute in the penal code that allows for a recommendation to the judge of the Superior Court, which is the same thing as district courts in Texas, to resentence, which is, and I'm sure you all would agree, for your trial court judge to be able to just go back and rewrite the script.
Decades later.
Yeah, decades later, it's hard for me to fathom.
What is the...
That was my next question.
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I agree.
Is that right? Is that it?
It has to be. Nobody cared about this until all the Netflix and everybody started coming out with documentaries and then the series.
And Garcon did a press conference. He said that he didn't cite the Netflix series, but he cited the documentary that Netflix had dropped. And apparently their office got flooded with calls. I also think you've got to think about the fact that he's up for re-election. California is an extremely progressive state. So there's a lot of factors that go into play.
All right, next question. Sorry, Pete.
I was going to say, I think just to follow through, I just trying to do the progression real quick before we get. So this got teed up, obviously, with some documentaries, but legally, as I understand it, there was a writ of habeas corpus filed by Mark Garagos. And so that's what legally kicked the procedural thing off.
Yes. So, I would say decades ago, the original appeal was filed and the original appeal was denied. And so at that point, your conviction is final. Your last line of defense in Texas and most states would be a writ of habeas corpus, which is where you can raise constitutional issues, ineffective assistance of counsel, prosecutorial misconduct, things like that. You're not really objecting to erroneous rulings by the court. You're making constitutional objections. And that was, they filed a habeas corpus writ, or writ of habeas corpus in 23 based on new evidence that they received. That is a different avenue than the request for resentencing from the prosecutor's office.
So, and I always like to, someone asked me like why we started this podcast, and one of the reasons was words are used, and I don't know that lay people and a lot of lawyers don't even know exactly what that means. So a writ of habeas corpus, I mean, there's some Latin there, but technically what is it? That is a document that is submitted to what tribunal to get what relief and for what reason?
So it's writ of habeas corpus, It's sort of like produce me, show cause for the body.
Holding me in jail.
Exactly. You can file them. There's different types of writs of habeas corpus. You can file them pre-trial if a defendant is being held at no bond or a high bond. But essentially, it's just like an appeal. It's just your last chance.
I don't know this, though, but in the penalty phase in California, when they got life without parole, is that given by the jury or the judge?
I think the juries elect punishment. And
that's crazy that a jury can elect your punishment and then a judge can turn around and resentence you.
Don't quote me on that, but I was...
I don't know that.
I think as far as... And that was my thought. When you don't look at the habeas corpus is a good thing because new evidence comes to light down the road. I mean,
sure,
that happens. But for a district attorney to just be able to say, you know what, time's passed, I think that we should rewrite the script. I think that goes against public policy of relying on jury verdicts. But I don't know for certain that is the case.
You see what I'm finding?
Are typically the writs of habeas corpus filed with a state court or a federal court, or is it both? You file with a state court.
If it's a state crime.
If it's a state crime, if it's a federal crime, you file it with the district court. And it'll make its determination because there are so many things that you're procedurally barred from. I started my legal career as an intern in the post-conviction writ division of the DA's office, and so it's sort of like the back end looking. It's like the retroactive viewpoint of how a trial really works. But you go to the trial court and then you request a hearing, and if you can get a hearing, it kind of goes up the chain of command, because if you win the writ at the trial court, it'll get appealed and continue to get appealed to the appellate court and then ultimately to the Court of Criminal Appeals.
If you ultimately win, does that mean you get out, you're released?
Sure. So there's different types of habeas corpus writs. Your objection might have to do with the punishment phase. In Texas and I think in California, you've got two phases of trial. You've got guilt, innocence, you got punishment phase. And so if your writ has to do with the guilt, innocence phase, then the conviction can be overturned and you get a new trial. I think in this instance, when you're talking about new evidence, that's going to go towards the guilt innocence phase. So the habeas writ has everything to do with overturning the verdict. The resentencing avenue has everything to do with just getting a new sentence.
So on the resentencing issue, is the court, what are the guidelines? Is the court going to look at just new evidence? Is it going to look at everything? Are they bringing in new witnesses, or is it just a judge and the DA and the defense lawyer saying, well, we could have done this differently the first time?
I think they take several things into consideration. It has less to do with the evidence, but I do think one of the factors they'll take into consideration is that the new evidence that's come to light is a letter that I believe Eric wrote to his cousin Andy discussing the sexual abuse or abuse generally prior to committing the murder. The other form of that of it...
Hold on. Where's this letter been since, for 35 years?
His cousin is super forgetful.
Yeah.
He's been looking this whole time.
Authentication.
Absolutely.
I had this get out of jail free card in my wallet, but whoops, I left my wallet at the gym.
Well, you got to think that he knew that letter was in... that would have been one of the first things I'd expect a client to tell me in a defense meeting in preparation for trial is, hey...
So I have a big question that I think we'll get to in a second. And maybe I'll just do it right now. So these documentaries make these two young men, from the way they planned the crime to the way they behaved afterwards to the way they behaved 6 months, 8 months, a year later, seem incredibly ham-handed, incredibly silly. So I guess my question is kind of twofold. Does that jive with kind of what you see legally and what's going on? And two, do criminal defendants really act that dumb? Like, these guys, their parents are murdered, and they're like, hey, let's take a jet. Let's spend millions of dollars. Let's do all this really, frankly, incriminating, boneheaded stuff.
I feel like, there's a reason why there's not a lot of open rooms at the Harris County Jail right now.
Well, I think there's a variety of criminals. Like, there's a variety of good lawyers and bad lawyers. There's a variety of smart criminals and dumb criminals.
Somebody at the DA's office once told me, Kyle, criminals don't choose a life of crime because they're overqualified for other lines of work.
I disagree with that. I think that if some of the people that I have seen represented, if they put half as much effort into a legitimate enterprise,
True.
they would be as successful, if not more successful, than had they taken the shortcut. Yeah. So I think that's the...
Yeah, Kyle.
Applies to every Kyle.
Sorry, I could try harder to be a better lawyer, and I wouldn't have to commit crime.
So look, that's how it keeps us in business. So I don't,
I looked it up, and it appears that Judge Weisberg was the one that actually sentenced him.
That makes me feel a little bit.
Me too. It makes more sense too, because I was like, if a jury's assessing punishment, I get it on the death penalty side, right? But if the jury's assessing punishment, then you could just. If the DA says, they've been in long enough, and then you can just take it away. It does seem odd.
I've seen in trials where we've elected to go to the judge for punishment, or when I was a prosecutor and the defense elected for the judge to go to punishment. That was a big hang up in a lot of cases for juries was, well, if I don't get to decide punishment, then I think I'm going to be biased during the guilt innocence portion of trial. I think people really, especially when you're talking about child sexual abuse cases, they want to see it through.
Who hammers the defendant more?
As a judge, specific.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Do you have a constitutional right to a jury to decide that, but the defendant can waive it?
Waive jury sentencing?
Yeah.
Yes. So you make an election, and I think, look, on a child sex abuse case,
I choose
really
cake.
I think no matter who the judge is, you take the judge on that one.
I don't know.
Depends on the judge, huh?
I don't see a lot of lay persons being like, they did it, but maybe we let them. Maybe they'll learn their lesson after a few years.
I'd have to see how.
Yeah, but maybe
I've never done any of this.
Maybe
before,
what the jury thinks is severe is not a big deal to a judge who puts people away all the time, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to know exactly where and which courtroom my client is in before.
Yeah, Kyle, we would have to know exactly which room or
courtroom you're in, Bill.
So back to this Menendez deal. So the writ of habeas corpus filed cites the evidence, that letter, but also some testimony or some, in some form, from a member of the boy band Menudo.
What?
Which is also a great breakfast soup.
Yeah. Menudo was the OG boy band.
Yeah.
From when I was a young.
Maybe probably the Jackson 5 for you, for when you were a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then,
That's great too.
And so I don't know where that came up. So they submit this new evidence. Do y'all know, did it come from, did the documentaries kind of flesh it out because you've got all these people asking questions and interviewing people after the fact?
I can't say whether his affidavit pre or post dated sort of the Netflix and the really popular documentaries.
So the request on the writ, here's our evidence. Did the writ ask for new sentencing or new trial or vacate?
I think that the request would be for new trial.
Okay.
Based on, in light of new evidence. And that's a ground you commonly see through writs habeas corpus is new evidence.
And then so taking it to the end, the DA at some point reviewed everything and just was it, to use another legal term, sua sponte, the DA all of a sudden decide to look at this resentencing?
Gabriel Garcon, who is the DA of Los Angeles, gave a press conference. So their office probably had a division that was already working on the habeas corpus, the writ of habeas corpus. They also have a division, I think in Harris County it's called the Conviction Integrity Division, but essentially they've got a division that's sole purpose is to determine whether resentencing recommendations should be made, which is a pretty progressive.
Yeah, it's the Conviction Integrity Unit.
Okay.
In LA.
And so my understanding is that documentary drops and their office is just flooded with phone calls. And so I think that drew a lot of attention to, hey, we need to take action on this.
So, and one of the proponents of resentencing is Kim Kardashian. So, Kim, if you'd like to come on the Dirty Verdict,
Kim.
Case.
I know we couldn't get you last time, and I know you were a little bit upset about it, but you're more than welcome to come back next time you're here.
Fly south.
How old is Kim Kardashian?
Old enough to party?
Late 30s, 40.
Like, she was a child when this happened too. What does she have to do with it?
Yeah, she had to be, because a couple of years later was.
She's become very.
She's 44 years old.
She's become involved in interested in criminal justice.
Yeah, reform.
Oh, okay.
And she is currently 44 years old.
O.J. Simpson was like
OJ. Oh, yeah.
In L.A.
And her dad was quite, Mr. Kardashian was quite famously one of the lawyers.
So back to the Menudo. Yeah. It's just a fun word to say. It appears that the cousin who got the letter was a member of the band, and it all fleshed out in, when we say the documentary, it's Menendez + Menudo, Boys Betrayed, that came out in 2023.
Yeah. I thought there were two different guys. They had the cousin and the boy band member. Two guys. But Bill, I'm computer out to
fact checking to make sure that we are accurate.
I thought there was no fact checking.
Stop counting the bodies.
All right.
Soon. I mean, that's
so
4 years ago.
You've dealt with a lot more criminals than we have. We talked about this off air before we got started. It seems like bad kids, even bad eggs, like real bad folks, walking into the den saying, "How's it going, Mom and Dad?" and then blowing their heads off with a shotgun.
Allegedly.
Well, that's not really allegedly. They definitely did that.
No, yeah, that was not in dispute.
Yeah, that's not in dispute. That seems like a crime, and this is not to defend what they've done, but that seems like a crime that requires some really terrible stuff as motivation, which to my mind, knowing nothing about criminal law, suggests maybe they were
sexually abused
or had something incredibly terrible happen to them as children. But you've done this a lot more than I have. Does that sound like you're putting the whole picture together?
I agree. I think that's an argument that I would make as the defense, especially if I'm not disputing
the murder, actually.
Murder.
Yeah.
It's just like a battered woman case, right? Where the person or the battered woman stabs the husband 45 times. That's not, you don't stab someone 45 times in self-defense. There's got to be a little rage and aggression and underlying.
Yeah. There's something going into that.
Better term going on. Yeah.
There's a history to that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Which I think is something to be said about, you look at the punishment range for murders in California, 25 to life. So, and then you look at Texas and it's 5 to life. Texas has a lot more understanding for
Nuance.
There's a lot more.
I find that surprising.
I'm not surprised. I mean, Texas is it's a no duty to retreat state.
Oh, I get it. That makes sense.
The way I see it is
some folks need killing, and we recognize that.
We're not going to say you didn't do it. We're not going to say you didn't commit murder, but we get it. That's not what it says in the law. But I think policy behind it is some murders are worse than others.
Yeah.
So
gotcha. Interesting.
I mean, there's a thought that maybe juries are wise and they make the right decision after being presented with all the evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, it's why we've got sudden passion in
I've got that right now.
Do you?
Look at hair.
It's election night, maybe. I'm feeling a little bit excited.
Yeah. Move over from Kyle.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a hearing, I think, Anthony, like in December, where the judge is going to decide this.
I think November 26th is the habeas hearing, which is independent of, again, I think I've said it.
The resentencing thing.
So, and that's what's crazy is I think that, the conviction itself could ultimately be overturned independently of the judge's decision to grant resentencing.
Because that was my question, because apparently the second trial, the judge really limited a lot of this sexual abuse allegations by the sons.
Yes.
And I was surprised that didn't get looked at the first time.
I think that, I agree. I don't know the legal basis for the exclusion of that evidence. I mean, a lot of times, and most of the times in our murder statutes, you are allowed to look at the evidence that goes towards the nature of the relationship between the complainant and the victim and the defendant. Because in a case like this, you've got to look at the circumstances surrounding what happened to find out motive, intent, and things like that to decide if they did commit the crime.
So I recall from criminal law that there was some statute out there that said criminals could not financially benefit from their crimes at a later date. Like you can't write a tell-all book from prison.
It's the Wolf of Wall Street.
So are Lyle and Eric going to get out and just not be able to benefit off the proceeds
I believe they sought their trust
of their current fame?
I don't believe it or not, that is a legal issue.
But they would have forfeited the trust. Like you,
I don't think you can.
No, I think that's law. Is the probate court says if you killed the person from whose estate you take, you are now pre-termitted.
Well, no, I think there's a difference between having a trust as you're living versus having an inheritance.
No, I'm saying I thought the law was,
maybe I'm wrong,
if you murdered somebody and you were supposed to get their inheritance, whether it's by trust or any other instrument, that transaction is now void.
I just want you to know that none of us are concerned that you've looked this up.
Yeah,
I just remember a lot from Trust and Estates.
Just putting that out there.
I think these guys are going to be so happy they're not in California prison that they'll figure it out.
I think so. You can't collect a life insurance policy.
That's my point.
But I don't know about if there's a book written down the road that they're precluded from collecting any payment because they mention.
I know the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort was a very strong condition of his release and I think imprisonment was that he gets zero out of it. So he made zero off the movie, off the book. Book's way better than the movie.
That'd be more of a civil question than a criminal.
Not mine. That's a smart civil lawyer, not me.
Here's some interesting stuff too, or questions for you. One of the brothers has been married twice.
It's got to be Lyle, right?
And one of them has been married once. Have you ever had a client that's been? I'm sure very few of your clients end up in prison, but the handful that did, he laughed. Have any? I haven't gotten married.
While in custody, I haven't come across that yet. But
do they let you visit with your wife?
I have a question, Kyle. And judging by your facial expression reaction, we're going to know what the answer is. But I am aware that there's a number of TikTok and Instagram accounts that post photographs of incarcerated women, and they're looking for love.
Yeah.
Kyle, you ever seen one?
Yes, I haven't.
He just owns it. I love it.
Not only have I seen that,
Follows them.
well, I'll tell you, I used to laugh pretty hard because I'd go to hearings a lot of times in I'd call them rural counties where they had a court of general jurisdiction, where they would do, criminal pleas and condemnation cases and parking tickets and then mass tort cases or maritime cases. And I would walk in, and they'd bring in 6 or 7 ladies in the orange jumpers, and I would always turn to the person next to me and be like,
Careful
I'd
here.
be like, I think she might be making eyes at you.
I'll allow that. I thought it was
Because these young ladies, innocent until proven guilty, Bill. That's what I'm saying.
And you don't discriminate against young, older. You don't discriminate. Orange jumpsuits get you going.
Whatever you're bringing.
Depending on your level of security, you have conjugal visits.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
In Texas?
Kyle, really? Like he didn't know?
Conjugal visits?
Conjugal?
I kind of thought that was fake.
No, it's not fake.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you like, again.
Look at Kyle's his gears are turning up there. He's like, I'm gonna have to start liking those Instagram
I've watched
posts.
a lot of female prison movies.
If you're a jealous woman, you've got your man. You know where he is at all times. He's
That's
not
true.
surrounded by other women. No, I don't really know their motive behind that.
How many conjugal visits?
There he goes. Look, how he.
I should have known better than to go down this route. No, this is the thing. This was like one of the earlier, this pre-OJ. So this is one of the first, 24/7
Courtroom TV. Yeah.
deals. And they're both handsome.
Well, they did not televise the second one, I believe.
Okay.
And one of the brothers did not testify in the second trial. Lyle didn't, the older one. And it was because of he had written a letter to like his friend trying to get him to fabricate some kind of story or something along those lines. But I know the other one was, what's the other? Eric testified. If I have my people right, he testified for like 2 weeks straight on the stand, which is crazy to me.
I think to your point, right, this trial took place in the early 90s. And so we talked earlier about what is really in consideration at the resentencing. That's less evidence-based. It has more to do with have these defendants been rehabilitated, and is it safe to release them back into the community? And so I think that the factors they're looking at are other members of the Menendez family who I guess the state would consider victims indirectly. How do they feel about this? What did the guys do in custody? Did they join gangs? Did they not join gangs? And it sounds like from the press conference that they've continued their education.
Yeah, it's
actually fought for other prisoners.
One of them has a degree now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Not from Princeton, though.
No, Cal.
for instance, but
You shut up.
I'm pretty sure.
I would assume
that.
I would assume Texas Tech.
But luckily, we have every answer in the world.
I think the sentiment towards sexual abuse victims in 2024 is
Very different.
very different. I mean, we're in a completely different society.
Yeah, University of California, Irvine. Lyle got his degree in business administration.
Yeah, that's been
Or actually, it might be a bachelor's of art.
I haven't watched any of the documentaries, but I listened to a lot of podcasts in preparation for this. And that's kind of the overriding theme is that, in 96 or 92, whenever they were tried, the sexual abuse component was not nearly as strongly considered as it is now.
And I don't the prosecutor used some term like in the second trial, something about abuse, and it rhymed. And I don't think in 2024, especially not in a county like Los Angeles,
do it.
Absolutely not. No.
Did you
The
look
glove
at
doesn't fit. They loved their little catchy rhymes.
Right.
They're spitting bars back then.
one last question, then I'm getting the high sign that we got to wrap this up because we got a lot to cover tonight.
Yeah, because it's election night.
It is election night in
We can all
America.
show which ones we are. I am the conservative of the group, and just say no, kids, because my wife is Nancy.
You're not going to out-conservative me. I'm Ike, man.
You look like Ike's brother that chose a very different path than Ike.
But I've also got the tan suit, so sometimes I'm Barack Hussein Obama.
When you have the icon, you look like the before and after of a product that doesn't work.
You think I don't have feelings? You think I'm made of metal?
I mean, you're holding a picture of Ike of Dwight Eisenhower over your face.
Okay, you had one last question?
Kind of not a great question, but I think pretty good. It looks like a lot of this unraveled for the Menendez brothers because they confided in a psychologist or psychiatrist. And the way it all plays out on some of the documentaries is the psychiatrist thought the Menendez brothers were going to kill him. And so he was recording this stuff in the event of basically as ransom. Like, if you kill me, I'm going to mail this stuff out to the local newspaper. Does that
And why does that come in? Like, how can that be discoverable?
I guess that's my question is like, I feel like if I'm talking to my doctor or my psychiatrist, they should shut up. They should never say anything.
Not if you are admitting to a crime that puts people. But that's a future crime, right?
That's a great question, right?
I think he goes for a pass too, because you would then be a co-conspirator after the fact.
Well, no. It was the seminal question that you went through, I thought, in professional responsibility, right? Is the two lawyers that found out where the body was. You have an absolute right to attorney-client privilege. That extends to other facets. Their psychologists, psychiatrists have that same or a similar ethical duty.
Yeah. I thought unless it was an ongoing crime or someone's about to be injured or murdered.
Well, I think stating that in an effort to prevent themselves from being murdered might be the argument. But I don't know specifically. I was thinking that same thing is how, if they had confided in a psychologist and they are protected under some form of confidentiality, what was the exception to that confidentiality? It must have been that they thought, or I think one of the avenues would be, well, I think that they're going to harm me. And so
I thought the exception was the girlfriend of the psychiatrist found out about it, and she told the cops where the tapes were. And so they never actually made him explain what the incriminating evidence was. They just went and took the tapes.
Bill's got the
according to an AI overview on Google, which I can neither confirm nor deny is accurate, this case established the new exception for a therapist-patient confidentiality rule when a therapist has reason to believe the patient is a danger to themselves or others. So if you've gunned down two of the closest loved ones of your life who has provided you always, and then you kill them, you might be a danger to everybody else. Mm-hmm. Just saying.
That seems like a good reason not to tell the truth to a psychiatrist.
So this case started before like all the documentaries came out. There was a big social media trend because the Mark Jackson basketball card of that year, he's playing, and they're sitting
in the
courtside on it. It was like
because they were mourning. They were mourning the death of their parents, so they were courtside at a Lakers game.
Good Knicks, but Lakers Knicks. Lakers Knicks. So
see, we're both right this time.
We did this, we'd be sitting courtside.
All right. So Anthony, thanks for coming on to give us a quick little rundown on the legal intricacies of this very interesting case. Remind us where we can find you on the internet if anyone unfortunately needs to hire a criminal defense lawyer,
or they need to refer a friend.
Yeah. And based on the inbox of the Dirty Verdict podcast social media, also your personal phone number has been requested a number of times.
I'll let you pass that out independently.
I do all the time. I'm like, no, I got to stop here.
You can find me on cogdellawfirm.com.
Awesome.
Excellent.
I wasn't here for the first time, so glad we got to see you. Glad we got to meet.
Yeah. Sorry you had to do that, Anthony.
So if you like the show, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok. We're sometimes on X and Facebook, but I think that covers it.
Yeah, you nailed it. You're getting really good at this piece to close us out.
Yeah. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. It's too late to say vote, but we hope everyone...
If you're not online already, you're not going to get to vote.
Our polls are still open for 32 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.